Welcome to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. And my special guest today from Cave Creek, Arizona is Bob Boze Bell. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be here, sir.
Bob, you know, we've had a lot of great podcasts together over the last couple of years, and we've talked about numerous subjects, but one that I think that we love to talk about, and I think you're not shy to talk about either, is the importance of your artwork, but also how you were inspired by the lawmen and outlaws and fugitives and the great characters of the West, how you were inspired by them to pursue how to illustrate their lives through your art. Is there one person in particular that started your path down this illustrated life and times of the Wild West?
Oh, absolutely. And his name is Henry McCarty. Better known as William Bonney, an alias, and better known as Billy the Kid, which he was only known as for the last 6 months of his life. I just find those kind of ironic little twists spectacular. But yeah, he's the one who I think my first drawing was when I was like 9 years old. My grandmother had it, and when she passed, it came back to me, and it was just very early, hit me hard. And of course, my grandmother told me how we were related to outlaws, and she was from the bootheel of New Mexico down by Lawrenceburg in the Animas Valley. So I was very inspired very early by my grandmother.
I think that's great. And what was your grandmother's name? Is it Bobby Guess?
No, Bobby Guess is my mother.
Okay.
Her real name was Lily Louise, but everybody called her Bobby because she worshipped her father, Robert Guess, who I'm named for. And in fact, several of the kids in the family, my Robert Guess, the poor guy, he had 5 daughters. Okay.
Oh man.
And my mother was the middle daughter, and so the youngest daughter, Patsy, she named her son Robert as well. So in the family, I was called Robert Allen, and my father's name is Allen, and he was called Robert Gerald. And so it's so funny when I get among Kingman folk, you know, everybody goes, "Hey, Robert Allen," you know. Well, I'm 10 years old again.
I love that. Yeah, when family names are that strong, it's like an Italian family, you know, Tony, Joseph, Tony. And so I love, and in our family, we have 3 Jebs in a row, all different middle names. And so a lot of times we want to distinguish my son from my dad. It's Jeb Allen. So I love that because my father-in-law's first name is Allen. So yeah. I think family names are great. And the names of our outlaws and our legendary heroes of the West just resonate and ring forward through time. And I think there is something about why certain names have just, you know, Buffalo Bill, Wild Bill Hickok, you know, Billy the Kid, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, even like Bat Masterson, Geronimo, all these Cochise. I mean, Sitting Bull. They're just great names that just resonate through the legends of the mythic West. So Billy the Kid, did you keep painting and drawing Billy the Kid as you came of age there and even present some to your art teachers in junior high or high school?
Well, not really. I wish the art was pure like that, but of course it wasn't. And I quickly graduated to rock and roll, and I, you know, forgot all about Billy the Kid for about 20 years of my life, really. I mean, I still was a fan of the Western, and I was a fan of Billy the Kid, and read True West magazine. You know, I would go get it all the time. But I became distracted by girls and rock and roll, and I was a drummer in a band. And so, but I really came back to it. And my mother, this is an interesting full circle here. In 1989, my mother sent me for Christmas a used book, and I opened it up on Christmas morning, and I was kind of disappointed. I was like an old book, and it was the Saga of Billy the Kid. And I thought, no, Mom, I know this story. And so I'm sitting on the couch, and the kids are young, and they're tearing at the wrappers and screaming at each other, and I'm trying to, you know, hold court there. And I read the first line, and it said, John Chisholm new cows. And I thought, well, that's an odd beginning for a book on Billy the Kid. And this is in the 20s, you know, it was Walter Noble Burns.
Right.
And so I kept reading. And the next thing you know, my wife says, I'm going to bed. I go, really? And at 2:00 in the morning, I put the book down. I read the whole book and I set it down and I said, I was born to do this. So I came all the way around from that first drawing to 1989, and it was in quick succession that in 1992 I published my first book, The Illustrated Life and Times of Billy the Kid. And then in 1999, two crazy friends of mine and I bought True West magazine, and I think you know part of that history.
Yeah, so, that's for sure. Well, and I think then I love the fact that you have been riding this this artist hoot owl trail with Billy the Kid the whole way.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting trip, and I just got, and it just keeps turning. Okay, so sometimes as a parent and a grandparent, now I've got 4 grandkids and stuff, and so I worry about a little bit about the guns and the, you know, emulating outlaws and stuff. And just yesterday, I got a book in the mail from a friend of mine who lives in London. And his name is Darcy Sullivan. He's a Victorian, flamboyant character. And he sent me this book called Western. And it's cartoons of Old West characters. And there's kind of a deranged Billy the Kid one that says touched and stuff. And he thought I would like it. And so I'm reading it. And then I get to the foreword, and it's by one of my heroes, Bill Watterson. Created Calvin and Hobbes cartoon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now,
love Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah. But now listen to this quote. These drawings are about history. They're about the brutal, feral part of America. They're about guns and violence. They're about cultural collisions. They're about environment. They're about deranged roles of masculinity and femininity. They're about phony cultural mythologies and cheap patriotism. These drawings explore the themes of America, the historical and the mythic West as the essence of the American character, ... And ye gods, look at who we are, ! End of quote.
Man. That's wow.
So
brilliant.
Well, it is, but it unravels part of the thing that we celebrate. And then when I'm working on a book now on Jesse James and the Civil War, and it's just so brutal. I remember reading about the Khmer Rouge. You know, there was these kids that were deranged and were killing people. And I thought, well, what kind of a culture would create that? And then I'm reading about Jesse James and the killer kids of the Civil War. And these guys, well, they're 15 years old, and they're doing the same thing. And it's so savage, and it ultimately gives birth to the American gunfighter, the thing that I celebrate and enjoy. But reading this quote from Bill Watterson, I'm like, man, there's the other side of the equation.
Right, for sure. And it's I love the fact that this conversation is ongoing, you know, and it's and people are continuing to be inspired by it. And we've got some sponsors to thank here at our first break, but we want to come back, and we've got 2 shows that are on the wall right now, one in Scottsdale and one in Prescott. And we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about those 2 shows that investigate and celebrate your artwork, along with 2 other artists who also have been inspired by these mythical, legendary characters of the West. We'll be right back on Arizona Roundup with Boze Bell.
Since 1995, Helkin and Horn Ad Agency has helped local businesses stand out and succeed, from print and radio to websites and social media. You see, their talented team crafts your brand's message and offers a plan to get it out into the community. Do you want results backed by 30 years of experience? Visit AZAD, that's azadagency.com, and do it today. Helkin and Horn, where their slogan is "Be Known."
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, Arizona. My special guest today is Bob Boze Bell, and we're having a great time today talking about Western art, Bob's inspirations, the muses of his life in from the Old West. And just before the break, we were talking about the fact that you have 2 shows running right now here in Arizona, and one is at the prestigious Western Spirit, Scottsdale's Museum of the West, a place that I love to go. It was a museum junkie. As director of the museum at Charlotte Hall Museum, I love getting down to Scottsdale. I'm always surprised what they've got on their beautiful exhibit floors there in Old Scottsdale. So tell us a little bit about what's happening at Western Spirit, Scottsdale's Museum of the West, with your art show, because it's not a solo show, is it?
No. 2 of my crazy friends, Tom Ross and Buckeye Blake, we've been scheming for quite a while to do something at the Billy the Kid grave in Fort Sumner. And we've always felt like it could use a little more pizzazz, a little more showmanship. In fact, Joe Ely, one of my rock and country rock heroes, he wrote a song, me and Billy the Kid, which is I read a background on it, on the creation of the song. And he said he created it because he made a bypass off of Route 66 and went to the museum and was so disappointed. And so he wrote this song. Me and Billy the Kid, his hair's all wrong. It's something I could write. You know what I mean? As being a petty connoisseur of the genre. Anyway.
I do have to interrupt you here real quick, because I am committed to doing a feature with you on the music of the American outlaws, and I'm really big on all the songs that have been written, and there's an entire album, I think, just on Billy the Kid music. I mean, I think they did a ballet, but there's a lot of great rock and country music in folk songs about the outlaws of the West. So I digress, but I'm still very interested in writing that with you.
Yes, absolutely.
So the Joe Ely, of course, an icon of West Texas, and your fellow artists, tell me, where Tom Ross and Buckeye Blake, where are they from, and what have you guys done together here at the Western Spirit, Scottsdale's Museum of the West?
Well, it started in Santa Fe about 15 years ago. Tom Ross had a gallery there, art gallery called Due West, and we did a joint show there, we being Buckeye Blake, Tom Ross, and myself. And we've always had this kind of like loose affiliation of, we just love this stuff. We love the Western outlaws and lawmen and stuff. And then Buckeye, he got set in his mind that he was going to do a sculpture of Billy the Kid in death, and that they would somehow put it in the museum at Old Fort Sumner to replace that kind of, behind bars grave that's there. It's been stolen like 2 or 3 times. And so he ran into a wall of silence, or, of negativity, because this was back about 20 years ago when everybody wanted to dig up Billy the Kid. And there was all this forensic.
I remember that.
Talk. Yeah, we did a couple of cover stories in True West about it. And what happened was that they said, well, we can, there was this other Billy the Kid, Brushy Bill, who was from Texas, and he claimed to be Billy the Kid. And then somebody said, well, all right, let's dig up his mother, the real Billy the Kid, and she's in Silver City, New Mexico. And then let's dig up Brushy Bill and dig up your Billy, and let's see if the DNA matches. And so somebody went to the powers that be, the fathers of Old Fort Sumner, and said, guys, what if Billy's not there? And and there could be. I mean, the graveyard has been grown over. They're not even exactly sure where the bodies are. I think they've done, ground checking since then, but there is no definitive proof that he's there. So then that So Buckeye ran into that buzzsaw. They were like, we don't want any more attention here on this. And then fast forward to this year, and Buckeye met with the new powers to be in Old Fort Sumner. And Marianne Cortez is her name. She championed this and said, "Oh, we need this." And so that built up a head of steam. And then we did a cover story at True West on on Buckeye's efforts to put this proper sculpture at the Billy the Kid grave. And the next thing you know, I went to the Scottsdale Museum of the West, and I talked to the curator there, Andrew Patrick Nelson, and I pitched him. I was standing in the hallway. I pitched this. I said, "Hey, I know this is kind of off the wall, maybe not really a museum show, but how would you like to do a show called The Resurrection of Billy the Kid?" Long story short, he bought it. He said, "Let's do it."
I love that.
I have to say, the show is bigger than anything I imagined. It has this air of respectability because of the museum itself, you know. And Andrew Patrick Nelson, he just made it into this. First of all, it's in a hallway. It's not in a gallery. Okay, so it's got a little renegade, you know. People came in during the night and put the show up. It has a little bit of outlaw, you know, zane to it.
Isn't that the same wall that you walk down? I think I've seen a Will James exhibit there. It's a nice long hallway where you kind of the exhibit kind of unravels as you walk down the hallway.
That is correct. Unraveling is a great word. And so the big question was, well, then where do we put the sculpture of the dead Billy the Kid? And Andrew Patrick smiled, and we turned the corner at the end of the hallway and went under a staircase. And he said, "It's going to go right here." And I thought, that is just crazy. You know, it's underneath the staircase, and there's LED candles and stuff. So it looks like you've moved into a death scene in a funeral home, only it's under a staircase. And then there's even a book there for you to sign your name.
I love that.
Isn't that fantastic? And so I could not be more proud of that. I just think it was 10 times bigger and better than anything I could have thought of.
That's spectacular. And so there's a great mix of the art there between you and Tom and Buckeye Blake. Does Buckeye Blake have tell me a little bit about the art the three of you provided?
Well, we all come at it from entirely different directions. You know, Tom is very whimsical, I guess might be the word. He might hate that word, but I see him as coming from a more Fritz Shoulder, maybe.
Sure.
Coming from that end of the art spectrum, which is totally valid, totally the opposite of anything I would do, because I looked at one of his paintings, and we were joking. We were talking to the docents who were going to have to sell this to people coming into the museum, and so he did a painting on the croquet photo, and he's there talking about how it was worth 10 million and stuff, and I couldn't stand it, and I went, and then everybody goes, "What?" And I go, "Tom, you could talk all day and not, if you're going to talk history, now you're stepping on my toes." Okay, so we got into it right there in the hallway, which I love. And that's what I love about Tom, is that he's not going to be shy about talking about his angle and coming at it, and I'm not going to be shy coming back the other way. So we really had fun doing the show, and in many ways, it's a train wreck. You know, you're looking over here at one of his whimsical ideas about how Billy shot Robert Ollinger, and then there's my version on a coffee cup, but I love that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic. And then what does Buckeye have in the show?
He has the big sculpture, and I think he has 2 sculptures in there, maybe a small painting. We kind of hogged him out on the painting part of it. Tom and I are prolific, of course. And but he has the showpiece. He has the big sculpture of Billy the Kid. And that's why you need to go see the show.
Right, and that's at the Spirit of the West, Scottsdale Museum, Western Spirit, Scottsdale Museum of the West in Old Scottsdale. And I think it's a fantastic museum, and you can spend a couple of days in there just going up and down the stairs and looking at the artwork. Do you know how long your show is on down there, Bob?
It's there till the end of the year, December 31st, and
All
then
right.
it goes to New Mexico, and we're going to have a big to do there at the in Old Fort Sumner on July 14th, which is the anniversary of the kid's death.
Got it. Oh, that's great. So, yeah, westernspirit.org is where people can go online to learn about the Boze Bell, Tom Russ, and Buckeye Blake art show on Billy the Kid in Scottsdale. And here in Prescott at Charlotte Hall Museum, a little closer to home, we have a show that we're going to come back and talk about. That's been that we're going to have a big evening with you and Tom Ross at Charlotte Hall Museum on November 13th. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk about the inspiration for the art show on Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp at Charlotte Hall Museum.
For over 45 years, Blind Brothers Arizona has been the heart of window style in Prescott. From blinds, shutters, drapes, they will custom design and install with expert precision, tailored just to you, whether it's for your home or your office. You can trust the name that locals rely on. Visit blindbrothersarizona.com today, or call them at 928-776-1845. Once again, that's 928-776-1845 for a free consultation. Blind Brothers Arizona, the original since 1979.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum. And my special guest today is Bob Boze Bell. Bob is renowned for his Western art as the co-owner of True West magazine since 1999. He's also the executive editor of True West, and also a famous rock and roll drummer, radio DJ, and all around, I would say, Renaissance man who's helped define the West through his pen and ink for, I'd say, almost 50 years, or a little more than 50 years. Is that right, Bob?
Oh yeah, I hate to add it up, but yeah, we're sitting right at the half century mark.
Well, we're going to be, we're very, very happy to have a special art show at Charlotte Hall Museum right now called Bringing Doc and the Earps Home to Prescott. The art show at Charlotte Hall Museum is a long way from your early days of cartooning for New Times Magazine, but I think it still represents that flair and humor and sensibility of your artwork that brings it to life and has made your artwork popular for so long. And you're sharing the show with your good friend Tom Ross, who's also found inspiration like you for many decades in these legendary heroes and lawmen and bad men of the Old West. And this show is in Prescott for, a couple of very, very good reasons, but its inspiration starts in some investigations into this short time period in which Doc Holliday and the Earps were in Prescott, which kind of gets short shrift in the mythical retelling of their lives in the West. So how did we start? How did we get to having this show at Charlotte Hall Museum?
Well, I think it started with you, to be honest with you. You inspired Brad Courtney to go out and do some actual research about where was the boarding house where he actually stayed. He was rooming with John J. Gosper, who was the acting governor of Arizona because John Fremont was never here. And I thought, wow, how did Doc Holliday sink so low that he roomed with an Arizona politician? Ridiculous. But anyway, Brad found the place. Now he's found what appears to be where the photo studio was, where Doc's only pictures taken. There's only 3 verified photos of Doc Holliday, and
Right.
one of them taken in Prescott. It's the one of him standing in a long gray coat. And some of us believe that that's the same long coat that he's wearing at the so-called gunfight at the OK Corral, because Addie Borglund, who was a seamstress across the street from the Fly's boarding house. She testified at the Spicer hearing that a tall man in a gray coat stepped forward and then stepped backwards, and the fight began. And we think that what she's describing is he was given the Wells Fargo shotgun by Virgil Earp and was told to put it under his coat to not make a fuss about it. But when Doc Holliday came down the street and realized that the cowboys were in the side yard of where he was rooming in the Fly boarding house, that he seethed, and that he pulled out the shotgun, which is what alarmed the cowboys. They all reached for their weapons, and then there's this famous line in the build-up to the gunfight at OK Corral where Virgil Earp says, "Hold on, I don't want that." And what he was really saying was, "Doc, would you put that smoke wagon away?" Anyway, that photograph is so valuable, and it was taken right there in Prescott.
Right, and I think that's the other side of the story, that so many of the movies and the TV shows, they get to Tombstone and they leave out the trail that brought the Earps all to this journey, this kind of epic journey that the Earps, James and Wyatt leave Dodge City. We don't have the article in hand, the telegram or the letter, but obviously Wyatt has received word from Virgil, who's living in Prescott in 1879. He's the constable. He's been living there for a couple of years with his wife. And Wyatt and James and their wives get in their buckboards. Wyatt Earp buys a buckboard, thinking that he's going to run a stage line. He's going to leave law and order from Dodge City and choose another way of life once they get to Tombstone. But we know, for whatever, that he gets word that he should come to Arizona, that there's a boom town happening in Tombstone, but they have to go through, they're going to follow the Santa Fe Trail. And they stop in Las Vegas, New Mexico territory. And who just happens to be living in Las Vegas in the fall of 1879?
Yeah, Doc Holliday.
Doc Holliday and Big Nose Kate.
Yeah.
And they hitch the Wyatt says, "Why don't you come with us? We're heading to Tombstone, Arizona. There's supposed to be a boom on." And they join them in the wagon and continue traveling west across New Mexico and northern Arizona and down the Mogollon Rim through Camp Verde, where Virgil Earp had worked at one time, and into Prescott in November 1879. And I think that whole story, their arrival in Prescott, Arizona territory, the capital of the territory, they're in Prescott. And I think from all the legends that we know here in Prescott, there's people who think that Wyatt Earp was here for months, right? But how long are they in town for before they pack up and go to Tombstone?
Oh no, it's mere days. They don't linger there at all, and they go on their way. Now, what's really fascinating is that Doc and Kate were on their way. They came down the Bradshaws and came down to Tip Top, which was a mining town.
Because they leave. They don't go with the Earps. The Earps leave, and then they stay behind.
Yes. And then they go down to the Tip Top, and then they have a misunderstanding or something there, and they break up, and she ends up in Globe. He goes back to Prescott, and then goes back to Las Vegas. And this is the part that's just the mind blower, is that I did it. In fact, one of the illustrations that's in our art show is of Doc in stages. And I'm trying to portray him riding in a stagecoach all the way back to Las Vegas, which is like 560 miles. It's like, it's a ridiculous trip. And he went back and did cleaned up some business, and then came back to Prescott, and eventually went on to Tombstone. I think he arrives there in November of 1880. But yes, his time in Prescott is very interesting. And of course, Big Nose Kate comes back, and she adds things to the story, which I think are just fantastic. The gunfight at OK Corral is, this macho. Doc certainly does some major uh, he's a major part of that fight, so brave. But according to her, after the fight was over, he came into their room at the Fly boarding house and sat on the edge of the bed and leaned over and wept and said, "This is just awful. This is awful." And you when men tell stories, you don't get that side of the story.
No, you don't.
And it just brings a whole different level of humanity to it. And of course, she, Big Nose Kate, was at the Pioneers home in Prescott. And so I was up in Prescott speaking at a Westerners corral. And this is like 20 years ago. And I mentioned that a U of A grad student had interviewed her, and named John Bork. And the room just, there was a murmur in the crowd. And I was kind of taken aback. And I said, "I'm sorry, what, did I say something wrong here?" And they said, "There's Jim Bork. He was in the audience." And I jumped down off the stage and I went over and I took his hand and I said, "Well, I want to talk to you. I'm buying you a drink when we're done talking here." And isn't that amazing? The reverberations of history, just it's like a ping pong ball going down a pipe. It just keeps clanging from side to side and never ends.
Well, and I think that's the ping pong here that ping pong ball that has brought you and Tom Ross together at Charlotte Hall Museum, because we know what's interesting, Charlotte Hall herself and Kate Elder were living in Prescott at the same time. I've always tried to imagine one of those meetings that we don't know ever happened or not, but I think that there's an illustration there, Bob, hint of Kate and Charlotte Hall meeting as two women of the West in the before Kate's passing, and Charlotte, who died in 1943, and they're both buried in the same cemetery. You can take a pilgrimage out to the Arizona Pioneer Cemetery in Prescott, and on the top of the hill is Charlotte Hall's grave, not too far from her good friend and artist and photographer Kate Corey. And then from there, you walk on down the hill, and you come to Kate Elder's grave, and there's a lot of little decorations that people leave on Kate's grave. It's a little pilgrimage that people should make if they come up here to see Bringing Doc and the Earps Home to Prescott at Charlotte Hall Museum, which we're going to talk about in the next break after we thank these sponsors.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Stuart. This is great. As I often say about a good podcast program, you learn more here by accident than most places by design. And of course, we do it with a touch of humor and entertainment. And I'm so grateful that you are a part of Arizona Roundup. Now, it comes to you from the Charlotte Hall Museum. And my name is Stan. I'm the radio man, and I'm the founder of What It Takes Radio and the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network. And I was the one that kind of encouraged that Stuart begin this adventure, and he does it very, very well. And Charlotte Hall Museum is now one of the new wave ways of doing a museum. It's not just a place where there are dead memories and relics of times past, but it's a living, modern place where there are courses and classes and parties and performances and all kinds of events that are right there in Prescott, but also they are shared around the world. And of course, that's coming up. And so stay tuned now. Make sure you finish the program because Bob and Stuart will tell you about a real great event coming up. And that's a part of what we are and how we are different in the way we do museums these days. And you are a part of that, and we're grateful for your participation and your part in our program. Thank you very much. Now, here we go, the rest of the program.
Welcome back to Arizona Roundup with Stuart Rosebrook at Charlotte Hall Museum, and my special guest today is Boze Bell, and riding shotgun with us is Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp and his brother Virgil and Kate Elder and Billy the Kid, and we're having a raucous stage ride today talking about Western art with Boze Bell in this new show at Charlotte Hall Museum in its West Gallery called Bringing Doc and the Earps Home to Prescott, and it's a joint show between with Boze Bell and Tom Ross, and we're going to have a special evening at the museum on Thursday, November 13th, 4:30 to 6:30. It's open to the public. There is no fee, but we do want you to make reservations. Reserve your place. Reserve a spot to come to the show at charlottehallmuseum.org. And we hope that this is the first of many shows, Bob, that ties in our Frontier West through your artwork to Prescott. We know you've done a lot of artwork on Charlotte Hall herself, but this show focuses on the Earps and Doc Holliday. And Doc Holliday is the linchpin to the show because of the research that Brad Courtney had done. And we did a big cover story a couple of years ago about Doc in Prescott. What route did he take to get there? How long was he there? When did Kate and Doc break up? And then how did Doc Holliday find himself traveling south to join the Earps in Tombstone? And I think there's so much more to discover just about looking at Kate and Doc's travels together in Arizona. There's a lot of stories that haven't been mined about them, and they love going to Tucson for the St. Augustine Festival. And I think from Gary Roberts' research, there's a big sidebar about how Kate comes back to Tombstone and they leave for this kind of couple-week party that used to happen in August in Tucson called the St. Augustine Festival. But here at Charlotte Hall Museum in the West Gallery, we have a great art show of your original artwork as well as Tom Ross's and his interpretation of the Earps and Doc Holliday in Tombstone, as well as a beautiful statue of Tom. So tell us a little bit about the exhibit, Bob, and how it came together.
Well, this is a passion project for me, and I just love the entire Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp, Big Nose Kate story as it relates to Arizona, and of course they come in from all angles. You know, we have Sadie Earp coming in from the west; she was from San Francisco. We have the Earps coming in from Iowa and Kansas, and then as I was mentioning, Doc goes back to Las Vegas, so this is just the guy's got consumption, the guy's got tuberculosis, and he's in a stagecoach ride for 80 hours. Oh my God! It's just, that's one of the things that just always amazes me is the distances they covered is just shocking. And in the so-called vendetta ride from Tombstone, when Wyatt Earp and Doc and the so-called vendetta riders, they covered hundreds of miles, and they end up in New Mexico, and they end up going to Colorado on the train. But the distances that they rode is just absolutely staggering. And I'm very proud of all the new research that's done, and that's going to be showcased in the show as we celebrate these larger than life characters who are in our state.
Well, what's interesting when you describe Doc and the stagecoach, one of my thoughts goes to, I don't think I've seen this illustrated, but I think of John Carradine. I don't think John Carradine ever got the great father of the Carradine brothers, but John Carradine in John Ford's Stagecoach is Doc Holliday without being named Doc Holliday. He's the Southern gentleman who's quick with a gun, quick with his wit. He's a card player, a gambler, and I almost can visualize a painting of Doc Holliday leaving on a stage, going back to Santa Fe, or returning with that kind of visage looking through the window that we remember of John Carradine in the great John Ford movie Stagecoach. And I think that's what people are going to see when they come to this exhibit. They're going to see a whole series of your art pieces and Tom's that interpret the place, Prescott, Arizona, Tombstone, Arizona, and this brotherhood of the gun, which is I think that's the title of Mark Lee Gardner's new book, Brothers of the Gun, which came out this fall, that investigates the relationship, the gunfighter and relationship and friendship between Doc Holliday and the Earps. And that's one of the things that comes out in this show. So there's some historic photographs that you've also interpreted of Prescott in 1879, 1880. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. I'm a huge fan of Old West photography, and I just if I need to relax, I just get one of my many 10,000 books that are in my library, and I pull down a photography book. I just love looking at photos, and every time you look at it, you see something a little bit different. And so we included we included a smattering of Old West photos that I think really help tell the tale.
And the interesting thing now is that folks have come to Prescott. The Brad and Wendy Courtney have helped establish a Doc Holliday's weekend that is usually around Doc Holliday's birthday, which I believe is around August 13th, 14th of, is it August 13th? It's his birthday. And they have a plaque up now on Montezuma Street on Whiskey Road, just north of Gurley, that commemorates where Doc Holliday lived in the spring of 1880 before he took his trail of destiny down to Tombstone.
Yes.
And so Bob, we're going to have you and Tom are both going to be at the our exhibit night, our debut of this show on campus at Charlotte Hall Museum on November 13th. We're also going to have your books for sale that evening, and collectible issues of True West magazine, and some of your artwork. We have your posters for sale at the museum. Are you going to be bringing any additional posters or art for sale that night?
Oh boy, howdy! I'm going to have all kinds of stuff that very collectible, and I'm bringing that stuff.
Well, it's going to be a great evening. And are you working on any more? Is there an upcoming issue of True West magazine that celebrates the Earps and the holidays, and this big story that we're talking about here today about in Arizona, that this legendary gunfight behind the OK Corral?
Oh, funny you should ask that, man. Yes, it's at the printer even as we speak. It's probably rolling right now. It's our big Doc and Wyatt issue, Brothers of the Gun, with an excerpt from Mark Lee Gardner's brand new book. And then I took all of the artwork I could find, and I've been doing this, like I said, for about a half a century. And we did, in classic gunfights, 30 shots, 30 seconds, 30 scenes. And I cover it from Hafford's Corner to the walk down on 4th Street to the left-hand turn on on Fremont, and then the walk down to the vacant lot, and I show all 30 shots. And it was, we had to squeeze it in. It's a 6-pager, and it really came out great. That's at the printer, and it'll be on the newsstands in about 10 days.
This is the November-December issue of True West magazine.
Correct.
And if people want to learn more about that issue or to subscribe to it, or where they can buy it locally, they can go to truewestmagazine.com. And that's the best place to kind of keep up with the magazine, where it's being sold. You can actually, you can subscribe at the website. Can you buy a single issue through the website, or is that the best way to, if you can't find it locally, you just go to the website and say, I want to buy this issue, and then subscribe.
Yeah. Or come by the museum, and we'll have plenty of issues there.
Right. We'll have the most recent issue there on November 13th at Charlotte Hall Museum. The doors open at 4:30 to 6:30 in the evening with Bob, Boze Bell, and Tom Ross. It's a night you don't want to miss at the museum. We're going to have some surprises that night as well, and we're really looking forward to having you and Tom there. It's a very special evening, and from my perspective, this is the beginning of an annual series or multiple series that feature Western art, photography, that celebrates the how artists have interpreted the American West. We have the Prescott Indian Art Market every September, and I think it's important the Charlotte Hall Museum really, on a consistent basis, pays homage, pays off the fact that so many people's they find their inspiration to discover more about Western history through art. And I think this is going to be an evening we celebrate you and Tom, your artistry, your who has inspired you to pursue your craft and celebrate these classic Old West characters of the West, Wyatt and Virgil, and Morgan Earp, and Doc Holliday, and Kate Elder, and Sadie Earp, and the Real and Imagine West at Charlotte Hall Museum on November 13th.
Excellent. See you there.
Thank you, Bob, and we'll get you back here on the show real soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Arizona Roundup. We'll be back next week with our special guest, Paul Andrew Hutton.